Howdy, folks. This is the Colt 38 Cowboy, and bear in mind for this video, all I'm going to do is talk. Um, Recently, I made an acquisition um, of an old lever action. But before I get into that rifle, I'd like to uh, I'd like to show off this little puppy. This is a 38 long Colt double action lightning revolver um, that I bought from a pawn shop down in Beaver, Utah. Now, if you want one of these that has never been fired, the Beaver Pawn Shop still has one. Never been fired. So it's 5 grand as opposed to the 500 that I paid for this. Now, the reason I wanted to show it is because I know very little about its history. It was nickel plated at one time, it has been dropped, and it has been well used. Um, and that is about all I know about this handgun. And it came out of southern Utah. Um, this little gun is an object of nonstop speculation on my part. I continue to go, every time I pick it up, I go, who owned this? Why did they care that it was nickel plated? And under what circumstances was it dropped? Um, but that's kind of the subject for a different video because I do have a firearm on my lap that I kind of know a little bit about the history of because I know who owned it, kind of. So last year, about a year and a half ago, I was minding my business. I get a text from my father, who works at the local gun shop, fixing four wheelers and side by sides. He says, "I need you to get down to the gun shop right now." And of course, I was a little wonder what he needs. Well, I show up and he takes me up to the front and takes me to the gun counter. And he pulls down an 1873 Winchester that was built in 1894. And if you know anything about southern Utah during the Old West, you probably know a name of a famous outlaw who came out of southern Utah by the name of Robert Leroy Parker. Butch Cassidy. Um, my family has some history with the Parkers out of Circleville, Utah. Um, in fact, when Parker rode to Telluride, Colorado, my one of my ancestors on the Wiley side rode out with him. He wound up coming back sooner than uh, Robert did, but that's subject for a different day. But the my old man gets a wild hair and is talking. This gun could have been carried by one of his boys or shot at one of his boys or you know one of a situation like that. And he was losing his mind telling the story. And it was a cool rifle. Wound up being far out of my price range, and purchased by a man who was going to take it down to Texas to hunt elk with his friends. They were buying 100-year-old rifles for this hunt was their prerequisite. But it slipped through my fingers, and I was a little upset about that. And not too long later, I'm walking through this gun shop, and I see basically this sitting on a shelf. And I say, "Braden, will you hand me that gun?" And he hands it to me, and I take it in hand, and I go, "Do you know what this is?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's a Marlin, an old Marlin." And I'm like, "Yes, yes, it is. This is an 1881 Marlin." And I'm looking at the barrel, and right here it says 4570. 4570? Does this thing shoot? And he says, "Yeah, the lady who sold it to us, the lady who had that 1873, says the last year her husband was alive, he took this gun out and shot it. So it functions. And then I tilt the gun and I see 40 cal stamped on the barrel. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, what is this about? And he says, oh, it was chambered in 4060 originally and then rebarreled into 4570. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, ooh, this is sick. It has German silver fittings. It has a brass blade sight. German silver butt plate. This is a sick firearm. Now, the reason that I wanted to get into the Butch Cassidy story is I'm a collector of the strange and interesting. I own a Squire and Bingham Model 60, which is the strangest little 22 rifle that you'll ever see. They basically made them so that you can make it look like an M16 or an AK-47 or a Marlin Model 60 and so on and so forth. And I pull this off the shelf. They tell me $2,500. I'm like, sold. My old man is giving me a little bit of heck about it. It's like, why did you buy a rifle that can't shoot full power 4570s? That's gonna need some TLC. You can't pack it with you everywhere. Why did you buy a rifle like this and not a new Marlin? And I said, Dad, this rifle came out of Panguitch. About the same time Butch Cassidy and his boys were running around down there. Could have been used by one of them or shot at one of them. Kind of mimicking what he said about that Winchester. And he kind of changed his tune. But to make a long story short, this thing came out of the gun shop, and I loaded 8 rounds of 4570 into it and took it to the range. And it shoots. This thing is a tack driver at 200 yards. It is the sickest firearm that I own. And I'm going to have to do a video of shooting it and having it in like a nice white box so that you can just see its features a little better. But I'm going to do just a touch of gloating here. Because you do not see these guns almost anywhere. The Uberti company makes an 83 Burgess rifle, which is this rifle sized down for pistol calibers. Basically, Burgess, who worked with Whitney on the Whitney rifle, which was the first lever action to chamber 4570, first repeating lever action to chamber 4570. He built this rifle, and he then went to Colt and built a pistol caliber lever action. However, this rifle, they do not make reproductions of it. You do not see it in movies, video games, or books. This is a very unknown rifle for being one of the first viable lever action repeating rifles to be chambered in 4570. This thing is an extremely capable rifle, and it has become, in my opinion, the firearm that I would, if someone said, we're going to send you back to the 1890s and you're going to have to fit in, I'd be taking this rifle. I wouldn't take, even for defense, I wouldn't take like my SKS or my Winchester 73. I'd be throwing this in the bag because 8 shots of 4570 as fast as you can work a lever, this thing is This thing is nuts. This has become the prize of my collection. This thing is going to go up on the wall when I'm not taking it out to shoot it, and so on and so forth. But I really wanted to show this off because you don't see many of them. There's hardly any YouTube videos about it. So there it is. This is an 1881 Marlin. I'm going to get into it a little later and try and show it off on the range and such. So until then, once again, I've been the Colt 38 Cowboy. This is an 1881 Marlin, and thank you for watching the 1881 Marlin video.